Stage 4 ovarian cancer. It can't be removed. Most people live about 18 months. Dr. Patel's voice echoed in my head like a slow explosion. The room went silent. My heartbeat was the only sound I could hear. My hand stayed still, but inside, I was sinking. Fast. Then my phone buzzed. A bank alert. Joint account balance, $0. 3 outgoing transfers totaling $217,000. Before I could even process it, another message lit up the screen. Lucius, don't ask me for a dime. I'm done carrying us. I didn't cry. I didn't gasp. I opened my notes app and typed one word. Evidence. Then I screenshot everything. My name is Aurelia Martinez. I'm 41 years old, a former trauma nurse, and now a patient advocate. And on the worst day of my life, the day I was told I might not live to see 43, my husband chose to abandon me and steal every dollar we shared. But while Lucius was probably already booking his flight to the Bahamas, imagining me broken and begging, I was doing what I've always done in a crisis, staying calm, thinking 3 steps ahead, and quietly preparing to fight back. Because in my line of work, I learned one hard truth. When the world tries to erase you, the best revenge is to survive and thrive. An hour after leaving the oncologist's office, still in my scrubs, the scent of antiseptic clinging to my hair, I called Lucius. My voice was steady, calm, the same tone I'd used for years to deliver bad news to patients' families. The bank just alerted me, I said. Our joint account is empty. He sighed like I was interrupting something important. Must be a system glitch, he replied, voice muffled. I'll sort it out tomorrow. But in the background, crystal clear, I heard it, a gate agent announcing, Flight 422 to Nassau now boarding. Nassau, the Bahamas. He wasn't at work. He was already gone. Okay, I said softly. Thanks for letting me know. I ended the call, walked straight to my home office, and opened my laptop. I logged into our shared cloud drive, the one he never thought I'd actually use, and navigated to a folder I'd quietly created months ago. Financial records, backup. Inside were 2 years of bank statements, tax returns, investment logs, and insurance policies, every document time-stamped, every transaction accounted for. He assumed cancer had made me weak, but I'd spent a lifetime preparing for emergencies. And this was just another crisis, when I'd already begun to outmaneuver. 7 months earlier, I'd woken up groggy from a minor surgery, just a routine follow-up after my hysterectomy. Lucius was in the bedroom, packing his gym bag for his morning workout. As he zipped it shut, a small white stick tumbled out onto the floor. I picked it up. A pregnancy test. Positive. My heart stopped. Lucius, I whispered, holding it out. He turned pale. That's not mine, he stammered. It must be a mistake. Someone at the gym left it in my bag. But his eyes darted to the window and his voice cracked. I knew then. Later that night, while he slept, I turned on my personal laptop. I'd never used encryption before, but I'd read enough to know how. I created a new folder, password protected with a phrase only I would remember, Contingency. Inside, I began copying everything, bank logins, insurance policies, property deeds, even old text threads. I didn't know what I was preparing for, but my gut screamed, he's going to leave you. Now, sitting in that oncologist's office, I was glad I'd listened. With the joint account gone, I needed liquid assets fast. I called Mr. Delgado, my late father's estate lawyer. He'd handled everything after Mom passed, and he knew our family's history. Aurelia, he said gently, your grandfather's mineral rights trust is fully funded and accessible. $1.2 million held solely in your name. Lucius has no legal claim to it, ever. Relief washed over me like cool water. That trust had been set up when I was 10, after Grandpa sold his oil-rich land in West Texas. Lucius knew I'd inherited property, but I'd never told him about the royalties. He assumed I was financially dependent on his architecture salary. Now, with treatment looming and bills piling up, I had more than enough. I wired $50,000 to my private checking account, the one he didn't know existed. Then I called Dr. Patel's office and scheduled my first chemo session. My care wouldn't wait, and neither would my plan for justice. 2 days later, my old college friend Priya slid into my DMs with a message that made my blood run cold. Saw this on Instagram. Is that Lucius? Attached was a photo. Lucius on a white sand beach, arms wrapped around a woman with fiery red hair and a tiny bikini. They were kissing under a palm tree. I zoomed in. Cleo, his executive assistant at the firm. She'd been to our house twice for team dinners, always laughing too loudly at his jokes, always touching his arm when she thought I wasn't looking. The caption read, Paradise with my king, #new beginnings. I saved the image, added it to my contingency folder, and then did something bolder. I tagged 3 mutual friends, people who knew Lucius's devout Catholic parents, and sent them the link. Within hours, his phone was ringing nonstop. But I stayed silent. Let them ask him why he's sipping rum punch in the Bahamas while his wife faces a terminal diagnosis alone. Panic hit me the next morning when I remembered our health insurance. Lucius was the primary policyholder. Could he drop me? I logged into the portal, fingers trembling. Yes, technically he could remove me with 30 days notice. My stomach dropped. But then I remembered my patient advocacy work came with a separate nonprofit sponsored health plan, platinum tier, 0 deductibles, full oncology coverage, including experimental treatments. I'd kept it quiet because Lucius hated that I worked after my surgery. You should rest, he'd say. I make enough. Now that secret plan was my lifeline. I printed the policy summary, highlighted the coverage dates, and emailed it to Miranda Cho, the divorce attorney my nurse friend had recommended. He can't touch my medical care, I wrote, but he's about to learn he can't touch anything else either. I met Miranda Cho at a quiet cafe downtown, far from prying eyes. It was a small place with mismatched chairs and the smell of strong coffee. Perfect for conversations that needed to stay private. Miranda was in her 50s, sharp-eyed, with silver hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun and a tailored navy suit that said she meant business. She'd built a reputation for taking on what she called high betrayal cases, spouses who vanished the moment their partner got sick, addicted, or disabled. I slid my folder across the table. She flipped through it methodically. The bank alerts, Lucius's cruel text, the pregnancy test photo, the Bahamas snapshot with Cleo. Then she looked up and gave a slow, cold smile. He didn't just empty your account, Aurelia, she said, tapping the pregnancy test with her pen. He committed financial elder abuse. In this state, exploiting someone with a terminal illness isn't just unethical, it's a felony. My breath caught. So I can press charges? Oh, absolutely, she said. And we'll do more than that. We'll freeze every asset he thinks is his, bank accounts, investment portfolios, even that fancy car he leases. Starting with that beach vacation he's enjoying on your dime. She leaned forward, voice low. You documented everything. That's not paranoia, that's power. And right now you're holding all the cards. For the first time since the diagnosis, I didn't feel like a patient. I felt like a strategist. And the game had just begun. Lucius called that evening, his voice suddenly sweet, almost tender, like the man I'd married a decade ago. Babe, I was stressed, he said, sighing heavily. I didn't mean to leave you hanging. I'll wire you $5,000 for your meds tomorrow. I played along perfectly, letting my voice quiver just enough to sound grateful, but fragile. Oh, Lucius, thank you. That's so kind of you. I paused, as if gathering courage, then whispered, Does Cleo know you're helping your sick wife? There was a long silence, so long I thought he'd hung up. Then, stiffly, she's supportive. I kept the call recording the whole time, my fingers steady on my phone. I just miss you, I lied, injecting a soft sob into my words. I know, he sighed, sounding relieved I wasn't fighting. I'll make it right. When I hung up, I immediately sent the audio file to Miranda with a note. Add this to the file. He admitted he's with Cleo and implied she's okay with him helping me while he's spending my money on her. Miranda replied within minutes. Perfect. This shows conscious deception and intent to defraud. He's not just lying, he's performing. And performances leave footprints. I sat back, watching the sunset through my kitchen window. Let him think he'd soften me. Let him believe I was still the woman who trusted him. Because the real Aurelia, the one who kept records, who planned ahead, who never broke, was already 10 steps ahead. And he had no idea what was coming. Miranda spotted it first while reviewing our shared Amex statement. An $8,000 charge labeled Royal Bahamian Spa Packages, Couples Retreat. She called me immediately. "He's using your money to pamper her while you face chemo," she said, her voice tight with controlled fury. I didn't hesitate. I called the credit card company right then, my tone calm but firm. "My husband is not acting as my spouse for financial purposes," I explained. "He emptied our joint account the same day I was diagnosed with terminal cancer and has since abandoned me. All charges from that point forward are fraudulent and unauthorized." The representative, after verifying my identity and listening to the facts, canceled the card on the spot and reversed the pending charges. Later that week, through a contact who worked at the resort, I learned the full story. Lucius and Cleo had been turned away at checkout when their card was declined. They were forced to pay cash for their suite, meals, and even the airport taxi, using Cleo's personal card, which maxed out at $5,000. They left the next morning, embarrassed and arguing in the lobby. I pictured it clearly, him sweating under the Bahamian sun, suddenly realizing his easy escape had consequences. I sipped my tea slowly, feeling no joy, only quiet satisfaction. Justice didn't need to be loud. Sometimes, it just needed to be precise. And this was textbook. 3 days after the spa incident, Cleo posted again, this time a bikini selfie at sunset, golden light glinting off her sunglasses, captioned, "New chapter equals no dead weight." The words hit like a slap, but I didn't flinch. I screenshotted immediately, then opened my messages. I found Lucius's parents on Facebook. They still had me listed as daughter-in-law despite everything. I sent them a direct message. "Your son is in the Bahamas with his girlfriend, who just called me dead weight on social media. Hope you're proud." I attached the photo and hit send before I could second guess myself. Within an hour, his mother called, her voice thick with tears. "Aurelia, we had no idea. He told us you were fine, that you'd both agreed to separate peacefully. Ask him about the pregnancy test I found in his gym bag," I said coolly. She gasped so loudly I pulled the phone away from my ear. I hung up gently but firmly. The next day, I saw Lucius's father had commented on Cleo's post. "Delete this. Now, before it destroys everything." She did, but not before dozens of mutual connections had seen it. Rumors spread fast in their tight-knit church circle. By week's end, his aunt stopped speaking to him at the grocery store. I didn't revel in his shame, but I did appreciate the poetic symmetry. The man who tried to erase me was now being erased by his own world. And all it took was one careless post. A week after my diagnosis, Lucius texted me out of the blue, "Sell the house. Split the profits 50-50. I almost laughed. The house wasn't just ours, it was mine alone, inherited from my grandmother with a legal stipulation that it remained solely in my name. The deed had never been changed. I typed back calmly, "You have no legal claim to this house, or anything else I own." Within minutes, his reply came, sharp and venomous, "You're gonna die anyway. Why fight?" That was it. The mask was off. No more pretending it was about stress or timing. This was cruelty, plain and simple. I forwarded the entire exchange to Miranda with a single word, evidence. She called me right away, voice crackling with satisfaction. "This is exactly what we needed," she said. "It proves intent to defraud a terminally ill spouse, a serious aggravating factor in court. Judges see this, and they don't just rule against him, they punish him." I sat at my kitchen table, sunlight streaming through the window, and felt a strange calm. He thought my illness made me weak, but in truth it had stripped away all the noise, leaving only clarity. I wasn't fighting for revenge. I was protecting what was mine, what my family had built, what I'd earned through years of work and resilience. And for the first time, I knew with bone-deep certainty that I would win. Not because I was lucky, but because I was prepared. And he had no idea what that truly meant. Desperate and cornered, Lucius did the cruelest thing yet. He leaked my cancer diagnosis to my employer, the National Patient Advocacy Network. He probably assumed they'd quietly let me go, thinking I was too sick to work, or worse, that I'd become a liability. But he didn't understand the people I worked with. They weren't just colleagues. They were warriors for patients like me. Without telling me, my team launched a GoFundMe titled Support Aurelia's Fight, a tribute to years of my quiet dedication to others' healing. In just 48 hours, it raised $40,000 from coworkers, clients, and even strangers moved by my story. When my supervisor tearfully showed me the page, I was overwhelmed, but I knew exactly what to do. I donated every single penny to the Ovarian Cancer Research Fund and listed the donor as Lucius Vance in honor of his wife Aurelia. I even had the official donation certificate mailed to his parents' home. His mother called me the next day, sobbing. "Why would you do that?" she asked. "Because," I said gently, "good deeds shine brighter when done in the name of someone who forgot how to be good." The gesture wasn't forgiveness, it was reclamation. I took his betrayal and turned it into hope for others. And in doing so, I proved that his cruelty would never define my legacy. Instead, it would fund the very cause that might save women like me. Miranda hired a private investigator named Ray, a retired police detective with a reputation for uncovering digital footprints others missed. Within 3 days, he delivered a dossier that changed everything. Lucius and Cleo hadn't just started seeing each other after my diagnosis. They'd been involved since last November, for months before I ever heard the word cancer. Ray had hotel receipts from downtown boutique hotels, dinner reservations under Mr. and Mrs. Vance, and even a 6-month lease on a luxury apartment signed by Cleo, with Lucius listed as an authorized guest. There were texts too, flirty, intimate, full of plans for a future that didn't include me. "He didn't leave because you're sick," Miranda said, sliding the file across my kitchen table. "He left because your medical bills scared him. You weren't just a wife. You were a financial risk." I felt a wave of nausea, but beneath it, something steadier, clarity. This wasn't personal heartbreak. It was calculated abandonment. He hadn't been blindsided by my illness. He'd been planning his exit long before. I added Ray's report to my contingency folder, labeling it pre-medical timeline. Now, I didn't just have evidence of betrayal. I had proof of conspiracy. And in court, that distinction was everything. The man who thought he'd outsmarted a dying woman had left a trail so wide, even a jury couldn't ignore it. I closed the folder, took a deep breath, and began preparing my next move. On Miranda's advice, I filed my taxes early, 2 months ahead of the April deadline. I claimed all joint assets as solely mine, citing Lucius's willful abandonment during a terminal medical crisis as legal grounds under state family law. I included copies of his texts, the bank alerts, and the PI's report as supporting documentation. Within days, the IRS flagged my return, not for fraud, but for unusual asset allocation. That triggered an automatic audit into Lucius's finances. What they found was explosive. For years, he'd been underreporting income from freelance architectural gigs, pocketing cash payments and omitting them from his returns. He owed $62,000 in back taxes, plus $18,000 in penalties and interest. His credit score plummeted overnight, from 740 to 520. When he tried to rent a car for a weekend getaway in Miami, the rental company denied him outright. Cleo had to use her card, and from what I heard through mutual acquaintances, she wasn't happy about footing the bill for his mistakes. Meanwhile, I paid my property taxes in full, my mineral rights trust untouched and secure. Miranda called it justice. He thought he could vanish with your money and live carefree, she said. Instead, the government came knocking, and now he's drowning in debt he can't escape. I didn't gloat, but as I reviewed my clean, approved return, I allowed myself a small, quiet smile. Some consequences don't need drama. They just need time and paperwork. His sister Aurelia, my namesake, called me on a rainy Tuesday afternoon, her voice thick with tears. "He's broke, humiliated, drinking every night," she said. "He's sleeping on Dad's couch, and Mom won't even look at him. Please, Aurelia, show him some mercy." Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a quiet coffee shop on the edge of town. She looked exhausted, her eyes red-rimmed, her hands trembling around a lukewarm latte. "I didn't know he was capable of this," she whispered. I didn't speak right away. Instead, I reached into my tote bag and slid a manila folder across the table. Inside was a document I'd had notarized during our honeymoon, a prenuptial agreement amendment. Clause 4B stated clearly, if either party commits infidelity, they forfeit all claims to marital assets, including real estate, investments, and shared accounts. Lucius had signed it himself, in front of a witness, after a bottle of champagne on our last night in Cabo. Aurelia flipped through the pages, her face draining of color. He forgot this existed, I said softly. But I didn't. She closed the folder slowly, tears spilling over. He never stood a chance, did he? I shook my head. He did. He chose not to. She left without another word. The next day, Lucius called, begging for forgiveness, offering to make it all right. I didn't answer. Mercy, I'd learned, wasn't about sparing the guilty. It was about protecting the innocent. And I was done being innocent. The emergency hearing was held in a small, wood-paneled courtroom downtown. I wore a simple black dress, calm, dignified, unreadable. Lucius arrived in a rented suit, his hair slicked back, trying to project confidence, but his eyes betrayed him, darting restless, guilty. Cleo was nowhere in sight. Miranda stood beside me, composed and razor-sharp, her voice steady as she laid out every piece of evidence in careful order. The bank alerts timestamped the morning of my diagnosis, Lucius's cruel text, the pregnancy test photo, the Bahamas pictures, the forged prenup amendment, and Ray's investigator report proving their affair began months before my illness. The judge, a stern woman in her 60s with silver hair pulled into a tight bun, flipped through the documents without expression. Finally, she looked up. Mr. Vance, she said, voice like tempered steel. You emptied a joint account the same day your wife was diagnosed with terminal cancer, made no arrangements for her care, and then attempted to seize her inherited property. Do you deny these actions? Lucius stammered something about stress and miscommunication, but his lawyer barely looked up. The judge's tone didn't change. All of Mr. Vance's personal accounts are to be frozen effective immediately, she ordered. The court will reconvene for a full sentencing hearing once the financial audits are complete. That was it. No shouting, no gavel slam, just a decision that cut cleanly through every lie he built. As I stood to leave, Lucius tried to speak to me. I didn't turn. I walked out with my head high, the sound of the courtroom door closing behind me like a final verdict. Justice, I realized, didn't need an audience. Sometimes it was as quiet as a door closing. A local investigative reporter named Lena Cruz picked up the story from public court records and ran a feature in the City Chronicle titled, Husband Abandons Wife with Stage for Cancer, Then Tries to Steal Her Inheritance. She'd interviewed Miranda, with my permission, and included quotes from the judge's ruling, the prenup clause, and even the Bahamas photo. The article went viral within hours, shared thousands of times across social media, picked up by national women's advocacy pages, and even mentioned on a morning news segment. Lucius was fired the next day. His firm issued a dry statement about violating company values. Cleo blocked him on every platform and returned the designer watch he bought her with my money. His parents changed their phone number and told neighbors they were on an extended retreat. Meanwhile, my inbox flooded with messages, not just from strangers, but from women in similar situations. You gave me the courage to contact a lawyer, one wrote. I'm leaving my husband tonight, said another. But I didn't feel like a hero. I was just a woman who'd kept records, asked questions, and refused to be erased. Miranda sent me a text that night. You just became the face of financial self-defense for 6 spouses. Be ready. I looked at my reflection in the dark window, pale from chemo, tired, but standing straight. If my pain could protect even one other woman, then none of it was wasted. And that, more than revenge, was worth fighting for. 2 weeks after the hearing, Lucius showed up at my oncology clinic, unshaven and hollow-eyed. He waited by the front entrance until I came out after my chemo session. Aurelia, he said, voice cracking, I'll be your caregiver. I'll drive you to appointments, cook your meals, sit with you through the nights. I'll make it right. He reached for my hand, but I stepped back. Instead, I gave him a small, sad smile, just enough to keep him hopeful. I've been thinking about it, I said softly. Maybe we can start over. His face lit up like a kid on Christmas morning. Then I reached into my tote bag and handed him a manila envelope. Just sign these, I said gently. He opened it. Divorce papers, final, notarized, and irrevocable. His smile vanished. You're serious? He whispered. Dead serious, I replied. He signed with a shaky hand, tears welling in his eyes. As he walked away, shoulders slumped, I called after him, quietly, but clearly, enjoy your new life. He froze for a second, then kept walking, head down. I watched him disappear around the corner, not with anger, but with finality. The man who thought he could discard me like trash had just signed away the last illusion of control he had. And I didn't need to say another word. The silence said everything. I turned, got into my car, and drove home, alone but utterly free. While reviewing my mother's will with Mr. Delgado for the third time, I noticed something I'd overlooked before, buried in Clause 12, subsection C. In the event that Lucius Vance abandons Aurelia during a serious or a terminal illness, he forfeits all rights to the $50,000 Vance Family Trust Fund established in 2010 for marital stability. I blinked. I'd read this will a dozen times, but that line had always blended into the legal jargon. Now it stood out like a beacon. Mr. Delgado confirmed it was enforceable. The trust had been funded by Lucius's own parents as a marriage incentive, and the clause was ironclad. Lucius never knew it existed. His family had kept it quiet, assuming it would never be triggered. I filed the claim with the trust administrator the next day, attaching the court's ruling and Lucius's own text. You're gonna die anyway. 2 weeks later, a certified check for $50,000 arrived in the mail. I didn't spend it on myself. Instead, I paid off my car loan in full. No more payments, no more debt. Then I bought a bouquet of sunflowers, my mother's favorite, and left them on Dr. Patel's desk with a handwritten note for seeing me, not just my diagnosis. That night, I sat on my porch, watching the stars, and felt a quiet kind of peace. Lucius had tried to strip me of everything. My security, my dignity, my future. But in doing so, he'd unlocked resources I never knew I had. And the best part? He'd signed the forfeiture himself, years ago, with a careless signature and a glass of champagne. Irony, I decided, was the universe's favorite language. With his reputation in ruins and his finances frozen, Lucius turned to sabotage. He created fake accounts and posted scathing one-star reviews on my medical advocacy blog. Aurelia Martinez is a scam artist. Doesn't care about patients. Just wants your money. He even emailed my sponsors, claiming I'd misrepresented my credentials. But he didn't understand the community I'd built. My readers, many of them patients, caregivers, and fellow advocates, saw through the lies immediately. One woman, a breast cancer survivor, posted a public rebuttal. Aurelia helped me navigate my insurance denial when no one else would. This is clearly a jealous ex. Others flooded the site with glowing 5-star reviews, shared screenshots of his fake posts, and reported the accounts to the platforms. Within days, my traffic tripled. Ad revenue poured in. More in 1 week than I'd made in 3 months before. I hired 2 part-time writers to help manage the surge, both women rebuilding their lives after betrayal. The irony wasn't lost on me. Lucius's attempt to destroy my livelihood had funded its expansion. I made sure he knew it. Through a mutual friend, I mentioned my unexpected windfall. His last email to me read, "You ruined me." I didn't reply, but I did frame the analytics report showing the spike in traffic right after his attack. Under it, I wrote, "Never underestimate a woman with a mission and a paper trail." His cruelty became my catalyst, and that was a victory he could never take back. Dr. Amir, the physician assistant on my oncology team, had always treated me with quiet respect, not as a diagnosis, but as a person. After my 3rd chemo session, he started walking me to my car, umbrella in hand when it rained, small talk about books and old movies filling the silence. One evening, as golden hour painted the hospital parking lot in warm light, he asked if I'd like to get dinner. Just the 2 of us, no medical talk, no past baggage. I said yes. A week later, we were holding hands outside the clinic, laughing about something silly, when I saw him, Lucius, standing near the bus stop, staring at us with hollow eyes. He looked like a ghost of the man I'd once loved. Later, Aurelia told me he'd broken down in his father's garage that night, sobbing. She's already moved on. She doesn't even care. But I wasn't moving on to replace him. I was moving forward to reclaim myself. Amir never rushed me. He listened, waited, and saw my strength even when I felt weak. With him, I wasn't the cancer patient or the betrayed wife. I was just Aurelia, flawed, resilient, and finally free. When Lucius saw us together, he didn't see romance. He saw his own irrelevance, and that, more than any court ruling, was the true end of us. I squeezed Amir's hand and walked away, not looking back. For the first time in years, I felt seen, and that was a kind of healing no medicine could provide. Lucius sent me a desperate email one sleepless night. I'll return every penny. $217,000 plus interest if you drop the fraud and elder abuse charges. Just say the word and it's over. Please, Aurelia. I didn't even open it fully. I forwarded it straight to Miranda with a single line, he's bargaining. Minutes later, she looped me into a conference call. I sat at my kitchen table, tea in hand, as she dialed his number. When Lucius answered, his voice was thin and shaky. Miranda didn't waste time. You're not negotiating with Aurelia, she said, calm and cold. You're negotiating with the state. The financial elder abuse charge was filed by the district attorney's office, not her. It's not hers to drop. There was a long silence. Then Lucius's voice came through again, small, hollow, and stripped of arrogance. What do I do? Miranda didn't soften. Pray, she said, and start saving for your court-ordered legal fees, because you're still on the hook for $40,000. He hung up without another word. I ended the call, set my cup down, and watched the steam curl into the air. There was no satisfaction in his panic, only closure. He finally understood. This wasn't personal revenge. It was a systemic consequence. He'd broken laws, not just vows, and the system he'd tried to exploit was now holding him accountable. That night, I didn't dream of courtrooms or texts or empty bank accounts. I slept soundly, knowing the truth was my armor and the law my shield. No amount of begging could undo what he'd done, or what I'd survived. The sentencing hearing was brief, held in the same courtroom months later. Lucius sat alone at the defendant's table, wearing a cheap, ill-fitting suit, his father's most likely. The confidence he once wore like armor had cracked. His lawyer spoke softly, pleading for leniency, calling it a moment of poor judgment and a first-time offense. But the judge didn't flinch. She reviewed everything again. The timing of the withdrawal, the pregnancy test photo, the forged prenup amendment, the Bahamas trip, and the calculated attempt to seize my inherited home while I was facing a terminal diagnosis. Then she removed her glasses and fixed him with that same unyielding gaze. Mr. Vance, she said evenly, you didn't just commit fraud. You weaponized your wife's illness. The room went silent. Her ruling was calm but final. You are sentenced to 18 months of probation and 300 hours of community service, specifically at the Regional Cancer Care Center. You will repay the full $217,000 plus $40,000 in legal fees within 2 years. If you fail to make payments, this court will impose jail time. Lucius didn't speak. He just nodded, his face pale and drawn. Later, Aurelia told me he'd moved back in with his estranged father, who charged him $500 a month for a pull-out couch in the den. His architecture license was under review, and no firm would hire him. I didn't gloat. I didn't celebrate. But as I stepped out into the sunlight that morning, the weight I'd carried for so long finally lifted. Not the weight of anger, but of finality. He wasn't my burden anymore. He was his own punishment. Justice hadn't been loud or vengeful. It had simply been inevitable. 6 months into my treatment plan, after rounds of chemo, targeted therapy, and sleepless nights, my follow-up scan showed something the oncology team called extraordinary, significant tumor shrinkage. Dr. Patel used words like remarkable response and favorable biomarkers. 3 months later, after more tests and cautious optimism, she said the words I never dared hope for, you're in remission. I sat in her office, tears streaming down my face, not from fear, but from sheer, trembling gratitude. Amir took me to a quiet seaside restaurant to celebrate. No speeches, no crowd, just the two of us watching the sunset paint the waves gold. Over grilled fish and sparkling water, I raised my glass. To betrayal, I said, smiling through tears. The best medicine I never knew I needed. He laughed softly and kissed my forehead. You did this, he said. Not the cancer. Not him. You. And he was right. The same determination that made me document every text, save every receipt, and stand in that courtroom had carried me through treatment. Lucius had meant to break me, but instead he'd stripped away everything non-essential, leaving only my core. Resilient, focused, unshakable. I didn't need revenge anymore. I had my life back, and it was stronger, clearer, and more purposeful than before. As we walked back to the car, hand in hand, I knew one thing for certain. Sometimes the deepest wounds lead to the truest healing. And I was finally whole. 1 year after my diagnosis, I cut the ribbon on the Martinez Patient Advocacy Center, a sunlit, welcoming space downtown dedicated to helping women navigate serious illness and the emotional, legal, and financial storms that often follow. Funded by my Mineral Rights Trust and a modest book deal about my journey, the center offered free counseling, legal referrals, and financial literacy workshops. On my desk sat two things: a framed photo of Amir and me at the opening, smiling under a clear blue sky, and beside it, Lucius's final text, "You're gonna die anyway. Why fight?" Sealed under glass in a small walnut frame. A small brass plaque beneath it read, "The day I stopped being a victim." Visitors often asked about it. I'd simply say, some endings are really beginnings in disguise. And mine was still unfolding. Former clients now volunteered as peer mentors. Local lawyers offered pro bono services. Even Aurelius sent a donation once with a note, "He's in therapy." It's not enough, but it's a start. I didn't respond, but I kept the note. Not for him. For me. As proof that even the darkest chapters can lead to light. I stood by the window one evening, watching the city glow, and felt deep peace. My story wasn't about cancer or betrayal. It was about resilience. And as long as one woman walked out of that center feeling seen, protected, and empowered, my pain had purpose. That was legacy. That was victory. And it was mine.